call to order the meeting of the Dover-Sherborn and Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committees for Tuesday, August 25th, 2020. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020. Information on how to join remote school committee meetings and meeting agendas are posted on the Dover-Sherborn District website. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All right, my agenda. Thank you everyone for being here. Let's hope it's a little quicker than the last one. But thank you for sticking with us, everyone. So first is community comments. I'm just gonna read a little bit about before community comments. Please remember that community comments are an opportunity for us to listen to members of the community. It is not a forum for answering questions or engaging in a debate, and we will not be answering any questions tonight. We respectfully request that you please make your comments brief, about 2 minutes, and that you move the discussion forward by adding new information. Once the public comment section of the meeting has been concluded, we will move on to the other business, and unsolicited comments from the community will no longer be permitted. So can you guys help me with the scrolling part? Are there any community comments tonight?
You have Rochelle Nasarella has her hand raised.
Hi, Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Brooke, thanks everybody. I just heard you say you wanted to hear from us if we had new information, and I want to just highlight something that I'm not sure everyone might realize that I think is really important, which is there is a subset of our population that meets the criteria of high needs kids by DESE, and they are supposed to be prioritized for in-person education. I understand that doesn't mean they are to be guaranteed something that existed in February, but at the moment, I think that we're not there yet, and I want to ask that the committees do what they can to ensure that our high needs kids that the SPED department has designated as meeting the criteria receive the in-person instruction that they need and that the state has advised that districts need to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Okay, is there anybody else? Help me, Maggie, sorry.
No, I'm looking. I don't have any hands up right now.
I'm gonna give it a few minutes though, because I just wanna make sure everybody has a chance.
Oops, I've got a couple. Mr. John Lynn.
Hi, thank you very much. So just a couple points here. One is as we approach this restarting 3 weeks, we really wanna more communication than less communication. So I wish we can have more maybe parent orientation meeting for different mode of choice parents make. So that's one point. And second one is I understand this is a complex process. A lot of stakeholders there. I want you guys really do your best. I know it's very hard to balance different stakeholders, educators, parents, students, and administration, all of that. I don't want anybody to be left out. I don't know. I know won't be a perfect solution for everybody, but really trying hard so that everybody knows you guys trying hard and we're working out together. So that's number two. Number three is always the feedback and from parents about different mode of education. Really have a regular evaluation process and assess that very often, so we know what's how to improve, and we going to the next year. Should we go to full in person, or should we go back if things getting worse? Be very flexible. So that's all my comments. Thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you, John. We always appreciate your comments. Thank you. Maggie, sorry to rely on you for that.
No, I'm all set. That's my job. I'm good here. Right now, I don't see any additional hands up.
Oh, sorry. Can I?
Yes, Amelia?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I had a raised my hand, sorry.
Hi,
Thank you.
Amelia. Okay.
Hello, thank you all. I just will start by saying thank you all. I know how hard you're working. My comment, and I apologize if this all came up because I just hopped on, was just that we've really heard crickets from the high school, and it's been disappointing and hard for the parents because I feel like we've gotten middle school communication periodically, and I understand the elementary have as well, but I feel like there's this dearth of information from the high school, and it's making people kind of nervous. I just feel like if there could be any kind of check-in, it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. I know that's a parent of an incoming 9th grader, so I appreciate the comment. Is there anyone else you can see?
So far, no. And just if you're trying to raise your hand, if you put your like cursor over the 3 dots, or if you go into the participants, you can see there's a raise hand opportunity. So I have Kristen has her hand up. I don't have a last name, Kristen.
Hi, it's Kristen Sampson. Hi. So just a couple of comments, questions that I haven't heard specifically addressed, and I may have missed them, so I apologize if that's the case. So one is, what the plan is in terms of how this might evolve over the course of the school year. So, we've talked a lot about, well, we may go fully remote, but on the alternative, is there a thought that maybe we do get to the point where we're fully in person? And then my second question or comment is about how we evaluate the learning achievements relative to prior years. So like, is there going to be a way to evaluate, and I would hope sooner rather than at the end of the year, but to sort of check in a month or 2 in and say, where do we stand after midway through first quarter or at the end of first quarter relative to prior school years? Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's it. Unless.
Anybody else need to pipe up? We're good? We're good? Thank you so much for your comments, everyone. They really are helpful. And we have such a intelligent and invested community that it's always very eye-opening. Okay, so I'm gonna, next on the agenda, that's not mine, right? No, they're here. The superintendent search team presentation and recommendation, and I'm going to throw it over to Anne, if you don't mind, and your team to lead us through that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brooke. Appreciate it. For a change of pace, we'll talk a little bit about the superintendent search. The superintendent search team has been tasked with researching, interviewing, and then recommending a search firm to help the Joint School Committee and the entire DS community in our search for someone to lead the districts when Dr. Kier retires at the end of June 2021. So far, the team has sent out requests for proposal that included firm selection criteria. We chose to interview 2 firms and are tonight recommending the Joint School Committee's vote to retain the New England School Development Council, otherwise known as NESDEC, to assist in our superintendent search. The process of selecting a new superintendent can be daunting under the best of circumstances, but this year's search will be uniquely challenging. That NESDEC has completed 600+ searches and has extensive experience adapting and adjusting during their 60+ years is reassuring. Additionally, this is the firm that helped conduct our last superintendent search, so NESDEC really knows our schools and understands our commitment to excellence, innovation, equity, and social emotional well-being. So I've had a great team working with me, and I'd like to see if they have anything that they would like to briefly add to talk about the process, or something they'd like to share about NESDEC and why we chose them. So Michael,
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Mark, you want to start?
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, Mark, go ahead.
Thanks. One thing I appreciated in speaking with NESDEC is, in fact, we're not the first customer that they've worked with in this remote scenario. So not only do they have extensive history, but they've had more recent history developing things like focus groups and surveys under remote conditions. Also, one thing that was clear throughout the conversations we've had was their focus on establishing relationships with all stakeholders throughout the search. So finding simple ways to first kind of get to know people, even if it's through a screen, and then ask the questions you'd like to ask. And finally, that they're willing to facilitate this process indefinitely until we've selected a candidate that we feel is the best fit for Dover-Sherborn.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Angie or Michael, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think one of the things that was particularly important for all of us was the articulated flexibility that NESDEC has. We're going to be anticipating having changing conditions as the year progresses. Maybe our needs will expand or change a bit, and they were very open to kind of the charge changing or changing from in-person to remote to person, or even around some of the information gathering. So that I view as a real benefit, having that flexibility, particularly when we know things will be in flux.
And I was just going to add that one other thing was I like that they specialize. This is what they do. They are a superintendent search firm. So it's, you know, like when you go in for something, you know, if you want to buy a sports car, you don't go to someone where they mostly sell trucks. We're kind of going to where it is that they understand what the needs are and what we're looking for. And so I think that they're dedicated to specializing in our search, and especially with the remote option now, because they're having to pivot. And I agree with Michael and Mark that that's something that added another dimension. So the fact that they're already comfortable in the search and now they can pivot and do more or less, it's going to help us.
Thank you. So of course, all of this comes at a cost. In our research, we found NESDEC is neither the least nor the most expensive firm. If NESDEC is approved by the Joint School Committee tonight, we'll enter into contract negotiation with them. But in our preliminary discussions with the Executive Director, Arthur Betancourt, we've negotiated a price not to exceed $17,000. And to put that into perspective, our initial contract for the 2015-16 search was $17,200 with an additional $1,000 for advertising. So I want to see if any members of the school committees had any questions for us. I can't tell, so it seems if you do, you can just sort of speak up. Because
I don't necessarily have a question, but I did want to say a big thank you to Anne and to her crew for doing the legwork around this. I think that, you know, nobody has a lot of extra bandwidth right now, and you guys did a really thorough, I know you did a thorough series of phone calls and interviews and looking at different things. So I appreciate the time that you guys have put into helping us make what is, I think, a really substantially important decision in terms of the success that we'll get and the work that will be coming in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. I have to say that while I agree with you, we don't have a lot, it's actually kind of reassuring to be thinking that far into the future, because I think that right now we're so focused on this for a couple of weeks. So it's actually was really good to be able to think, you know, at some point we'll be through this, or there'll be a new normal. And so I actually really enjoyed that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. If it please the chair, I'd like to request a motion to approve to retain the New England School Development cost not to exceed $17,000 to assist in our search for a superintendent for the Dover-Sherborn and Dover-Sherborn regional school districts.
You're doing the region first?
Well, we can, it's up to Brooke.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you start with the region? If you
So
want
moved.
to.
Michael Jaffe, so moved.
Maggie Sharon, second. And can I have the folks at the region take their microphones off mute? Ann Hovey,
And have a yes.
Judy Miller,
Judy Miller, yes.
Michael Jaffe,
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Lynn Collins,
Lynn Collins, yes.
and Kate Potter.
Kate Potter, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. Thank you. Maybe next to Sherburne.
Sure.
Sure. Do I have a motion from Sherburne to adopt Ann's motion to retain the NSDAC for the search?
Amanda
So
Brown.
moved.
All right, Amanda first, and Megan, did you second? Megan Page?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay. Everyone else, is there any discussion? And take yourselves off mute and I'll do a roll call. Nancy Cordell,
Nancy Cornell, yes.
Mike Fitzgerald,
Mike Fitzgerald, yes.
Amanda Brown,
Amanda Brown, yes.
and Megan Page.
Megan Page, yes.
Angie Johnson, yes.
Okay, for Dover, does anyone request a motion to approve it's a retention of the New England School Development Council at a cost not to exceed $17,000 to assist our search for superintendent? Leslie,
Leslie Lee, I'm so moved.
and
Mark
a second?
Mark Healy, second.
Any discussion? If we want to take ourselves off mute, in no particular order except my screen, Colleen,
Colleen Burt, yes.
Mark,
Mark Healy, yes.
Sarah,
Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes.
and Leslie,
Leslie Leon, yes.
and Brooke Matarese, yes.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we will we'll be giving updates at our joint meetings and perhaps some in between. And the next thing we'll be doing is after we discuss with NSDAC next steps, the school committees will reach out and then we'll start to work on our outreach to the community and creating focus groups. So parents, you'll all be hearing from us as well. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Anne, and to the whole team for your work on this. Okay, now we're gonna move to the policy before we get to the fall reopening update, the policy on face coverings. And we're actually doing a first read of this policy, which you, I hope, saw the amended policy within the last half hour or so. So I don't know if you had a chance to read it. I wanted to throw it to Lynn, who is the Region's policy subcommittee member, because we had a interesting meeting with the Health and Hygiene Committee today, and maybe she could shed some light on the changes that happened after that. Would you mind doing that, Lynn?
Sure. Trying to figure out, I thought I'd be able to share screen, but I don't know what's happening. Here we go.
You are sharing. You're sharing something. Oh, there it is.
Sharing something. And now you're sharing. It's covering up the, there we go. Okay. All right. So this has been a fascinating exercise and a practical lesson in knowing your lane. So we want to implement a face coverings policy, obviously, for people who are going to be on the school grounds, in the buildings, you know. And so we looked to, as we do with all of our policies, we look to MASC's guidance, and they have a model policy that we drew heavily from that covers sort of the high level sort of direction that we as a district want to go in with respect to face coverings. The details and the specifics around what constitutes an acceptable face covering, the circumstances under which people will be exempted or accepted from wearing having face coverings will be covered in the health and hygiene protocols that are being established by that task force. So this policy, as Brooke mentioned, has been in evolution up until moments ago, because it's sort of a team effort of the school committee, the Health and Hygiene Task Force, Doctors Vitale and Peterson. Thanks to everyone for chipping in and, you know, at 11th hour. So we had a meeting today with the Health and Hygiene group, and we were able to sort of think through what should be in the policy versus what should be in the protocols. And I think I feel that unlike other policies in the past that we've developed, you know, there's a clear line between what school committee does and what administration does. This pandemic and the issues associated with it, you know, really put to the test sort of, you know, who needs to do what, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so we thought hard about, you know, what needs to be in this. So bottom line, this policy basically just covers high level. It says, and I can walk through it, you know, that obviously we think that face coverings are the most effective way to prevent the spread of COVID, that we will expect everyone entering our buildings, school grounds, school transportation, to wear face coverings, and that the families are to provide the face coverings, that the district will supply disposable face coverings, you know, without, you know, if it's necessary, but the face coverings will be provided primarily by the family. And like I said here, acceptable face coverings and the circumstances where face coverings are not required will be spelled out in the the hygiene respiratory protocol that will be developed by the administration. And then obviously there are a number of categories of people who are or will be exempt or accepted from the face covering requirement. And those exemptions will be provided upon submitting a written note from a physician, and then the ultimate determination will be made by the principal, the school nurse, and the boards of health. And the final determination rests with that group. And then let's see, discretion, yeah, okay. And then the last provision is for policy violations, because since the expectation is that everyone on our grounds will be required to have a mask unless specifically accepted from the requirement, students who violate this policy, their parents will be contacted, and they'll determine from that point whether the student needs to be removed from the building or some other exception needs to be made or arrangement needs to be made. Staff violations of the policy will be handled in accordance with the provisions of discipline for staff, and visitors will be denied entry to the building without a mask. So yeah, so that's the whole thing. And again, thank you, you know, to everyone who has provided input into this policy. And yeah, so if anyone has any questions, this is the first read, so we'll approve it after everyone's had a chance to review at our next meeting.
Can I just interject, Lynn? Sorry, we have scheduled a meeting for this Thursday. This is obviously timely, and we need to get it approved ASAP. So we have scheduled in the interest of doing that, I did schedule a joint school committee meeting this Thursday at 5 p.m. for the second read, hopefully very brief, and approval. Again, we don't need everyone, we just need a quorum. So obviously we can ask questions now, and then I would hope that you would reach out to your policy rep, Lynn for the region, Sarah for Dover, and Angie for Sherborn, like tonight or first thing tomorrow, with any additional questions or comments, because they need to turn this around pretty quick to get it back to us for Thursday. So. Somebody has some nice music. Lynn, do you want to?
Guys, if everybody on this call could just mute yourselves, and I know Anne has a question.
I do, thank you. Thank you so much to Lynn and the entire group that put together this edited policy. I think it's a much stronger than the original. The original was so long, and just really quickly, there's sort of layers of how we get things done, and policy is the highest level, which is what the school committee is one of our purviews. And it's, while a living document, it's designed to be more static. And that's why then the protocols are more easy to change, because we, in theory, do the 2 reads. It becomes part of a document that is then, it's a more permanent change. So I think it's really good to have a sort of a less is more. But because the protocol, the hygiene respiratory protocols are mentioned so frequently in this policy, I would love to, and I understand it's under development, but I'd even love to have a draft of that, just to make sure that it feels like it's covering all the things that the policy says that it does, even if it's just subject headings, before being able to vote on this, even though technically the protocols are not our purview, except that we would vote them into the handbook if that's where they go, into the student handbook. I think that would be really helpful. And one of the other things I'd love to consider is exploring who then is responsible for, we'll call it policing the face masks. Is that a teacher responsibility? Is it administration responsibility? Is it the whole community does it so students can share with teachers? If somebody, I don't know, I'm not suggesting that you go any way, one way or another. I'm just wondering how that will be done so that everyone is aware of who's responsible for that. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I don't know if Jill's managing that process, and so I'm not sure if Jill, if you have any thoughts on timelines of when the protocols will be ready, or
the protocol should be done by this week. I'm confident that they will, at least the face covering protocol will be done by this week. And as far as who becomes responsible, I think that's probably not my question to answer, but I would just say, as somebody from the Health and Hygiene Committee who's had many conversations about so many health related protocols, that it's really everybody's responsibility. And I know that doesn't give you a direct answer, Anne, but it really is going to be everybody's responsibility to kind of maintain the rules, the new rules related to COVID in the school. So I would expect that everybody should be paying attention and feeling comfortable to ask people to put a mask on if it's not on. And again, that's all I can say because I don't have any other authority than that, but it's more of the you know, we're all in this together kind of mentality.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I also realized it's really the building leader, it's up to the building leaders to figure out how they want to do it. I just wanted to make sure that that's on the radar because there's so much going on right now. Things sometimes slip because you just can't think of 100 different things all at once. And I understand that. Thank you. So if there's any way that we could see even the draft form, you can write draft in huge letters across it before our meeting on Thursday. I think that would be awesome for the protocol. Thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I know I have a question, and so does Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn.
And Colleen as well. I can't see anyone, but
sorry, I'm trying to do my hands.
That's okay, we can make it.
Pardon me?
Yeah, so do you want to go first, Meg?
Sure, it's short, actually. I don't know whether or not it should go in this policy or whether or not it will be in the protocols, so maybe Jill could answer this. But I was specifically looking for the when you're alone in your office with the door closed exception. So like I'm at work in a school right now, no mask, and Dawn also, and Andrew. And if we ever have any of our staff members who might be Zooming home to children, does that go in the protocol or the policy that you can take your mask off at that time?
And I would think that's a protocol.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's protocol.
Great. Then whoever's writing those, try and put that in there. Thanks.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, I think we have to stay kind of, as we talked about, in our lane on this one. Sarah, you can go next, and then Colleen. I can't see anyone, so just jump in.
Thanks so much, Brooke. I don't really have any questions, but I wanted to make a comment sort of from the parents' perspective on this one. And that is just that I know that everyone's got extremely full plates and there are a lot of moving parts. But for parents to be able to plan and get what they need in order for us all to be well equipped by the first day of school, you know, that clock is ticking. And I think it sounds like there will be a lot more detailed information in the protocol as to what is an acceptable versus an unacceptable mask. And I would just ask that, you know, we be very mindful that these are not necessarily things that you can get at the snap of the fingers these days. You know, there are shipping delays, things are back ordered, and just parents need to know what they need to get for their kids so that they can be ready for those in-person days as soon as possible with as much advance notice as possible. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, that's why this feels very, it needs to be done like now. That's exactly why, so we can communicate to the parents what will be acceptable and what won't. So thank you. And Colleen, I can't see you, but you're up next.
I'm here. Hi. I'm hoping for some clarification about the policy on wearing face masks when outdoors and socially distanced. I saw in the previous version that it had been listed as one of the exceptions, and then it's not in this one. Was that purposely removed?
It was because that's a perfect example of the level of complexity that is involved in this issue, and we took it out because it is something that the experts need to determine on their own, and so that those provisions that will be addressed in the protocol, but it's not going to be in this policy because it's more administrative.
And I imagine the nuances are, you know, it depends on what the activity is outdoors and yeah.
That's exactly the level of conversation that ended up taking place is, you know, well, are they going to, you know, what about recess? Is it going to be a controlled, you know, the kids can't move around, you know, they won't be able to come close to, like, what does recess look like? And the more we discussed it, the more complex it became, clearly in my mind, and not something that belongs in an overarching policy.
Thank you.
But it's definitely a part of the protocol.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I would say these discussions, Colleen, they're definitely taking place, and there's you know, a lot of good minds working on this. So this is, you know, if we stay at a higher level, that allows those experts to give us, and also to have, as Jill said, that everything's changing so quickly and the information changes so quickly. So they need to be able to pivot and, you know, in a way that we can't. So that allows them to take in new information and be able to be very current. Whereas, you know, we're the two read school committee lumbering along. So
yeah,
Michael,
Gators were fine.
Yes, exactly.
No.
Yeah. And I was going to say, actually, sorry, just while we were talking about families supplying face masks, like that seems to me a perfect opportunity if there's a parent group or a group of parents or kids that want to do a mask drive or something, to try and to get additional masks, maybe for bus drivers to have on board, or for teachers to have, and we all want to help and are looking for opportunities to contribute. So that struck me as it could be a good way to make a practical contribution if anyone's interested in doing that.
Can I just add quickly an edit that you may want to do? I believe the opening sentence says the Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee. You're going to want all 3 school committees.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So I think when you look in the policy manual, it might just always refer to the school committee because it's a 3 school committee policy manual, and it only designates a different name if it's for a particular one. So just double check that because
yeah.
Before you do your next read, so it just gets approved and covers all 3 schools.
School district. Yeah. Sorry. Yep. I'll do that.
Are there any other comments or questions from school committee members?
I have a comment, Brooke, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is the first policy of which I would anticipate we have a series that are COVID related. This is probably also one of several that it's critical to have the information disseminated in as many ways as possible in order to educate, inform the community, and to try to get compliance up as high as possible, so we can work on the path of getting to a full reopening, or at least staying at a hybrid rather than going in the opposite direction. So not really a question, but an urging to try to explore all avenues of communication, of frequent communication, of our various safety, our health and hygiene policies and protocols in order to try to encourage from a public health standpoint as high compliance as we can get. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else?
Brooke, this is Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
I don't know if you can see me, but I do know that PTO will be selling DS masks with the kids' initials on, and they should be getting the information out to parents in the next day or 2 as well.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay, if you have think of anything after, please get in touch with your representative like tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, because we do want to have time to be turned around, to have a chance to look at it, and then we'll see who can come together on Thursday at 5. It should be quick. Famous last words, but it should be. And if Jill can get us whatever she has by that point, it's a little chicken and egg, I know, but we just want to make sure that we're kind of covering all the bases. I know this is a big one, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Jill. Okay, are we all right to move on? All right, now we're going to move on to the fall reopening update. And before we do that, I want to say 2 weeks ago, the school committee supported the recommendation of Dr. Keogh and the leadership team to start the year hybrid with a fully remote option. That was essentially the go signal. And since then, Dr. Keogh, the district-wide leadership team, our building leaders, educators, counselors, staff, and we know the Board of Health have been working nonstop to operationalize how it's all going to work and what it's going to look like. So I think if you stop and think about what that encompasses, it's really quite staggering. I know we want to thank you all profusely for all the incredible work you've been doing and putting in on behalf of our kids and our community. I mean, we couldn't have a better team working on this, and I feel very blessed and grateful. So I hope that we all take the time to extend our thanks and grace to you all for all the time and energy and heart that you're putting into this process. So having said that, Andrew, I'm going to hand it over to you and the leadership team to take us through.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much, Brooke. Can you guys hear me? Yes, good, great. Okay, well, I am going to share my screen, if that's okay. Hopefully I'm on the right document here. Okay, so First and foremost, I want to welcome everyone. I know we have quite a few people attending tonight, and believe it or not, this is our final planned summer reopening task force update. I'm sure there will be many more, however, as the year goes on, but we had 4 planned over the summer, and this is the 4th. And over the past 7 months, you know, we've taken on what I would consider one of the most difficult challenges faced by this district and have truly risen to the occasion. And I'm proud of all that we've accomplished. However, I'm also acutely aware that intense times like these do not necessarily bring out our better angels. Rather, because of the continually changing parameters, media hype, and critical decision-making that's kind of been forced upon us, we at times become frustrated with each other and our situation in general. And I haven't been immune to this emotional roller coaster ride by any stretch. And I want to say, I haven't always been happy with the way I've conducted myself during this past 7 months. And I'm guessing that there may be others out there who feel as I do. So I'm asking that as we prepare to start the new year, that we, you know, take pause to recommit ourselves to modeling those critical skills and attributes we want our constituents and, most importantly, our kids to see. Let's agree to demonstrate patience, kindness, and perhaps most importantly, forgiveness towards each other as we struggle with these impossible challenges. Because in the end, we're one team working in the best interest of our staff, our students, families, and communities. We mustn't risk all that is good about Dover-Sherborn over politics, popularity, or expediency. We must stay focused on our key purpose, which is educating our students in the safest, most supportive setting possible. We can do this, and we can do it without turning on each other. We're one school system and the envy of many around us. So I'm asking you to join with me in attacking the problems, not each other, and to continuing our work together with the class and grace for which Dover-Sherborn has long been known. So I'm including this slide. I know that you've all seen it before, the quote from Commissioner Riley, but it's just a reminder, and I think we have to always remember that we are trying to the greatest extent possible to educate our students in person, in safe settings where they can receive the greatest amount of support possible. I have completed a reopening plan. It was submitted, was it 2 weeks ago? Now I've lost track. Yes, 2 weeks ago. And it's also posted to the website. There's some familiar stuff in there, but some things that we haven't necessarily shown. It is, in fact, the formal document that gets sent to the state. And so, so that is done. So I would encourage people to check that out. Another thing I wanted to bring folks up to date on is that this past week, the entire leadership team for the district participated in a retreat to process all that we've been through and to think more about what our year will look like moving forward. It was an excellent opportunity to follow a student/teacher's schedule and to gain a better understanding of what our learning spaces will look and feel like this fall. In truth, I think we were all a little shocked at just how hard it was to carry on our business wearing masks in fairly tight and warm conditions. There were moments, I'm sure, when we all asked ourselves, is this even doable? But when we walked away on Friday, we walked away knowing that, in fact, it is doable and that there are things we can do to make it more meaningful and comfortable. But we also know it won't be without its challenges. So some of the key areas of focus of the retreat were providing opportunities for relationship building among the members of the leadership team, identifying non-negotiables and best practices for hybrid and remote teaching and learning, determining focus indicators for educators, administrators as part of the professional growth process, sharing updates relative to ongoing task force subcommittee work, developing a communication plan to support students, educators, families in preparing for their return, outlining schedules and objectives for the opening of school. So it was a really worthwhile experience. I really enjoyed being with the team. There are so many good people in the system working so hard, and we often don't even have time to just sit with each other. So in that way, it was really amazing. But I've asked Beth McCoy, our assistant superintendent, who was really instrumental in the planning for the day, to share some more of the thinking behind the modeling which took place. So if that's okay with you, Beth, I'll let you speak for a few minutes.
Sure, thank you. So we took the administrative retreat as an opportunity to demonstrate our growth and all of the practices that we've strengthened over the last 6 months. Our teachers worked endlessly in the spring throughout the trials and tribulations of remote learning and came out with some lessons learned, best practices. And this was an opportunity for us to take that in addition to all of the work that the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee has done this summer and put them together to say, okay, what are those best practices? What are those non-negotiables? And what does it feel like to enact them in a school setting? So we created our own leadership retreat classroom through Google Classroom, and it models the standard Google Classroom template that our teachers will be using 3 through 12. And again, teachers K through 2 will be doing a similar activity in Seesaw. Our agenda was laid out in the weekly assignment template that our teachers will be using to provide assignments to their students in advance of the week so that things are easy to find and navigate and all of the links are embedded within them. We started Thursday in the middle school classroom. We came in, everybody got to choose a desk, and once we chose a desk, it was ours to keep, and we had name tags to kind of claim them. We all had our own bag of supplies, markers, manipulatives, things that we had and needed for the day that we could make our own. And we even zoomed into an administrator who was at home with a sick child. So we got to practice what it's like to live stream to remote students outside of the classroom. Our day on Thursday was split into 80-minute blocks, much like the middle and high school students will be experiencing during their days. And within those 80-minute blocks, we incorporated multiple activities. There was videos, discussions, small group work, so that we weren't doing any one thing for those 80 minutes. We got to try multiple apps, including Padlet and Jamboard. We took mask breaks and movement breaks. After the first 80-minute block, we moved to the high school courtyard and held our second 80-minute block there. And thanks to Dawn, we had desks set up there, again, 6 feet apart, all facing forward. So we got to experience that environment as well. And lastly, for the last portion of the day, we moved to the tent that's between the Commons and the high school and had a session outside with, of course, some screen-free options. The second day on Friday, we did remotely. Again, it was an adaptable agenda and adaptable lesson plan. So it didn't matter if you were in person or at home, a teacher could enact the plan and work within the parameters they're given. Interactive activities were included, including breakout groups, collaborating on a Word doc all at the same time, using the chat function and the polling function in Zoom. And then at the end of the day on Friday, we had an exit ticket so people could reflect on their experience and provide Andrew and myself feedback on how the retreat went. Again, modeling the reflection, knowing both what our participants walked away with and did we meet our objectives, as well as, professional practice in terms of our pedagogy and what would Andrew and I do differently if we were asked to do it again. So that was our retreat.
Thanks, Beth. So we can talk more about that if anyone has questions, but what I'd like to do now is share with you some of the continued progress of our reopening task force subcommittees. So this overlaps with some of the conversation that you just had around the health and hygiene policies or protocols and the mask policy. And we're going to talk about some of our remaining challenges because we're not out of the woods yet. So I'd like to begin with our facilities subcommittee. And again, we've highlighted in yellow our most recent work. The outdoor spaces have been identified for use, including the installation of 6 tents across all 3 campuses. Our student classrooms have been assigned to minimize mixing of cohorts, address traffic patterns, and to limit the passing of groups in the hallways. We can no longer think of our schools as this awesome social experiment where everyone's just passing at the same time and greeting each other. We have to think all of that through, and we've been doing that. Same thing for entry into the building. Multiple doors will be used for arrivals and departures. The HVAC preventative maintenance is being completed at all the schools, including filter replacements and cleanings. We've talked about this before, where appropriate, MERV 14 filters have been installed. In the grayer shade, those are things that we've already done. We still have some remaining work. And you know, upon recent guidance from an advisory from the Dover Board of Health, we're working to secure an engineering firm for an independent review of all of the buildings in our school system. That would include Pine Hill. We're also working to finalize our cleaning protocols for both during and after school hours. This is an important question for teachers. They want to know how frequently we will clean the building. Families have asked about bathroom cleanings. These things are being finalized and have been being discussed, but they're being finalized at this point. The health and hygiene latest, again, the revised mask protocol, the no buffs, gaiters, bandanas due to the emerging evidence of decreased effectiveness of those. They've met with the facilities subcommittee, as mentioned earlier, to align overlapping health and safety protocols and updated the DS protocols based on the 817 D/DPH guidance. So there is still remaining work here. Our health and hygiene subcommittee, and I know there's members here, so they can answer questions afterwards in this regard, but they're actively pursuing COVID testing options for DS students and staff. There's ongoing collaboration with Board of Health for protocols as state guidance becomes available. Ongoing assessment of staffing implications. So securing additional nursing staff. This is a challenge for us. This is one of those ones that keeps some of us up at night, Jill being one of them. But we need additional nursing staff. And I am assuming that because we're not alone, this has proven challenging thus far. We still obviously need to communicate with the families those protocols. That's why this timeline was so important to get these things knocked off. So in fact, we can begin that communication with families, and I agree with the members who felt like it was important that the families know with as much notice as possible so that they can prepare. It's actually not unusual for us to be writing to the families a few weeks before the start of school to, you know, to engage them. Dover and Sherborn especially are accustomed to kind of being away and then popping in literally 2 weeks before school starts, maybe sometimes even the weekend before, and jumping right into it. So people do need that info, and we want to forward any kind of health and hygiene related communications to our families. And then of course we want to train our faculty and staff on all the protocols and safety measures that have been established. So those 10 days before the students come, which start a week from yesterday, Monday the 31st, when our teachers return, these things have to be practiced and in some cases taught to our teachers. So there's still a lot going on in this regard. Our teaching and learning subcommittees, that is our group of, how many is it, Beth?
52.
52 people. Beth likes large committees. That is a big one. But it's important because we need all of those voices at the table. So this group, in the most recent times, obviously developed the hybrid model for learning, including the in-person and remote components, which is a big deal. They've updated our in-person learning model to reflect current guidelines and safety regulations, and held multiple Zooms with families and staff regarding how special education students will be supported. I don't think anyone on our reopening task force on any of the subcommittees stands before you in virtual form tonight saying that we've reached the summit and we're done. We're not there. We still have plenty of work to do, but we have tackled a lot and we're making great progress. If you look at some of these things that this group did, for example, collecting the feedback on the remote learning through surveys and focus groups and interviews. I think I'm being Zoom bombed. Folks, could you please hit the mute? Thanks. Just this 230 plus workshop days for faculty around collaboration and planning is a big, big deal. And it's a huge commitment by our system and our teachers in terms of preparing for this year. And I think it's a real testament to their hard work. So some of the remaining work that the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee has identified, continuing student data analysis and the utilization of evidence-based intervention systems. So a parent mentioned in the community comments, how are we going to know that what we're doing is effective? This is part of what we're talking about. We intend to analyze the data and to assess along the way to make sure that in fact what we're doing is working. They want to expand the repertoire of virtual assessment strategies and grading protocols. So people ask, and it's a good question, how do we account for test integrity if it's all being done at home? So if it's a honors history class, they just take that, and is there no accountability, or is it just truly the honor system? So some of these things have to continue to be worked out. Likewise, grading, because remember, grading was a challenge for us in the spring. We want our grading protocols to be appropriate and universally known and accepted. They want to coordinate individual meetings to discuss service delivery in the hybrid model and integrate a social emotional program to support student and faculty wellness, which, as you know, is it's kind of a hallmark of our strategic plan. So I'd like to shift just for a moment to the student enrollment, because obviously this pertains to our hybrid model and our remote learners. So I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but you can see how the numbers have shaken out at Chickering, Pine Hill, middle school, and high school. So when we think about our remote numbers, and when you think about these numbers in general, they do pretty closely align with what our families were telling us through our surveys. So I don't think there's been if you could put this into a pie chart, which we did not do, but if you were to, I think it would look very similar to how our families indicated they were planning to go with their children. So, so I don't personally find any of this surprising. Our homeschool numbers are up, but probably not dramatically, Beth.
A little bit. You know, in a traditional year, we probably have 10 families, and so, you know, now we're into the teens, high teens.
Yeah. So moving on from that, our transportation subcommittee has now been able to move forward. Remember, they were really dependent on that survey data from families in terms of whether or not those families intended to send their children on school buses. So they've the people who are going to be using the bus or the hybrid model have completed the request for bus transportation, and routes for cohort A and B are being developed along with seating charts. Remember, cohort A being Monday and Tuesday in person, and cohort B being Thursday and Friday in person. There is still remaining work for sure. Will we need bus monitors, and how many? There's a very real possibility that on some of these runs, there may be such a small group that the driver might be quite comfortable going through that process with the kids. But we want to be sure that we know that if in fact we need bus monitors to just make sure that the kids have their masks on, are appropriately seated, we want to make sure that those folks are in place. Again, that wasn't something that we budgeted for. This is, you know, one of those things that we have to do. Obviously, establishing the daily bus protocols for unloading and loading, the time on the bus, cleaning and sanitizing, assuring the adequate training for all involved, whether it's monitors or bus drivers or even administrators who are greeting the kids, and of course the students. And then we still have to coordinate transportation as applicable with Accept, who provides our out-of-district transportation. So this is kind of an important piece that I think a lot of people are interested in, but the MIAA, which oversees athletics in Massachusetts, has approved September 18th date as the start for any fall sports that will be allowed to play per community and local approval. So this is a big piece. The per community and local approval, in my mind, is huge. Again, we are working hard just to get our kids in 2 days a week, and the MIAA has come out and said that some sports can start 5 days a week, and we're not necessarily in agreement with that. The Health and Hygiene Committee has been discussing this, and they believe a phased-in approach makes the most sense for all in-person extracurricular activities, and I would agree with that, whether it's athletics or any other extracurricular in-person activities. They're recommending that we not begin these for at least 6 weeks after in-person schooling has begun. And the rationale for that is really clear. We know that the more exposure our staff and students have to outside places, whether it's through travel or club activities that go across state borders, whether it's athletics, that the more these kids have exposure to other pockets of the population in our state or our region, the greater the likelihood that we're going to see some spread into our systems. We don't want to go there right now. What we really want to do, what we think is our fundamental purpose right now, is getting our kids in person for education, and then look for the supplemental beneficial activities as time goes by. So we're thinking that that's a 6-week period. Under the remaining work, our feeling is that the late buses at the region won't be running for the immediate future. After school activities are currently being evaluated for remote opportunities. Some of them, some of our extracurricular after school activities lend themselves to remote to a remote model, and others do not. So we're looking at that. We're reviewing the DITA-SHITA enrollment and aligning staff with students to form cohorts, 10 to 12 students assigned to one staff with an assigned home base. We are feeling as if DITA and SHITA and the After the Bell Club, which is mentioned in the next bullet, something that we were adding this year as part of our start times change. We believe those are really essential for our working families, and we are going to do everything we can to keep those going. In terms of our communications, there's never enough. We've heard that loud and clear. There's never enough communication, but we are continuing to try to do better with this. We sent links to our presentations, Screencastify messages, set up Zoom office hours meetings for families. Obviously, these school committee meetings, these 4 meetings this summer, were all about communicating with people, and yet, surprisingly or not, when we sent home our information regarding registering in Aspen, the number of people who would come forward and say, I never heard anything about this at all, is always shocking to me, because I feel like we cover every base, but that's just the nature of things. But we really have gone above and beyond, I think, to try and communicate that info. But it's a never-ending commitment. We have to continue to work on it and continue to make sure people know what's going on, And I like some of those suggestions I heard this evening about perhaps running regular Zoom meetings at the building level and perhaps at the district level, so people can just pop in and ask their questions. It's something that I did as a principal that I thought was really helpful, not in Zoom, but in person, but it's the same idea. And it's just an opportunity for people to hear what's going on in the school and to ask their questions. So I think that's a good suggestion. We obviously created and posted the reopening plan that I mentioned earlier. We still have our opening of school letters to staff and families. We have done some preliminary writing to the staff, but we want to be sure we have all our ducks in a row. We've had ongoing conversations with the DSEA regarding some of the concerns that they brought forward, and we're still trying to iron those out, believe it or not, and have meetings scheduled for this week. And some of those things that are being discussed pertain to what the beginning of school will look like. So we are a little behind on our letters to staff, although I would argue they're probably more informed this year than ever before because of all of these meetings. But we do intend to, I intend to send my letter to faculty in the next 24 to 48 hours and to families in the next 4 or 5 days. So we're obviously going to continue to survey families and staff as necessary. We will continue to review and revise the district webpage as it relates to reopening. Just for what it's worth, I do not want to forget the fact that upgrading our webpage was something that the original communications task force was planning to do, and I hope that we can still do that this year. It may be too ambitious, but I think it would be a great thing if we could get our webpage updated. And then obviously ensuring that the work of the reopening task force is being broadly communicated through a variety of forums. So if you look at the timeline of our reopening work, this is the final update to the JSC prior to opening. We will continue to conduct weekly assessment of state COVID rates. Dr. Vitale and Dr. Parker have been helpful. Dr. Peterson have been very helpful with that in terms of giving us the numbers in the state and in the region, in our two communities. We have the JSC meeting scheduled for October 15th. I originally mentioned to folks in my final proposal, final recommendation for the hybrid model that we would make a decision at the 4-week mark. So this speaks to the question that came from the community member a few minutes ago, that at the 4-week mark, we would be looking at whether or not we could justify increasing or, if necessary, decreasing in-person instruction based on grade levels and area state infection rates. And then obviously, we're just going to continue with that weekly assessment of state COVID rates. So that's really where we are right at the moment. And I want to again thank the communications task force for manning the DS reopening email address, which is still up and running. We are accepting recommendations or suggestions for things where people feel like we could improve, and it's been actually really, really helpful to us. So that's that is an update of where we are, and I will certainly take questions.
Brooke, I'm happy to help you watch the chat if you want, just for hands up.
Sorry, Judy, did you put your hand up? You're on mute, but I'm back. You go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to do it electronically. I'm just lame. Okay, first, I'm going to start with the, and it's not requisite, but it sort of always seems that way. Wow. This has been a horrible and difficult process, and I'm so glad that we have made it through to this point. I am really hopeful that it's going to be better. And I'm really grateful for all the wildly hard work and that everyone has done, and particularly the leadership team and everyone on the task force. I had one really small question, which is, I know we're doing like 10 days of professional development with our teachers, and you may not have gotten to this yet, and I completely understand that, but are we going to do some training with students on the mechanics of how different being in school is going to be? And I assume that's going to be at the building level. What are we thinking in terms of that? And how will that sort of work, you know, into the school day?
So that's a great question, Judy. A really, really good question, and certainly relevant. It's so funny to me how often we forget about the kids, and they're the ones who will be there sitting in the seats. So yes, we do intend to have our building leadership process these changes with their students respectively. They do this every year. This is an annual thing for them. One of the things that we are working out is the amount of time staff will spend with students in that 10-day period. They really have asked for and need that time, that 10 days. But we also acknowledge that we have kids coming into school under really unusual circumstances, and they're going to need to come in and get a lay of the land before school officially starts. So we're working out the details of that, but I think it's safe to say that on that Friday the 11th and Monday the 14th, there will be pieces of time built into those days for our traditional check-ins. Those won't be K-12 check-ins, but we always have in-person check-ins with our youngest kids. We always have in-person check-ins with our kids transitioning from the elementaries to the middle school, and we always have in-person check-ins with our students going from 8th grade to 9th grade. So my expectation is that those things will continue, and that those will come at the latter part of the 10-day period. So I don't know if that speaks to all. I mean, of course, you know, there'll have to be a communication from the administration about the nuts and bolts of the year. Typically that happens, I literally have not discussed that with the principals, but that typically happens in an all-school or a grade assembly at the start of the year. That may not take place in that format because it can't, but the communication still needs to happen.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Dr. Kia, one of my astute members had mentioned, we actually have a joint meeting on October 13th. Am I correct?
I don't know. The 13th would be, yes, that makes sense.
That makes
I'm
sense.
sorry. I think I said 15th, but you're right. It is the 13th.
Yeah, okay, just so everybody's on the same page. Yep. I just wanted to point that out. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where I came up with the 15th. I was just mixing up the number with the students.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure, well, everybody's listening, that we're all on the same page. Okay, I have a Colleen, and then Anne, you're next after Colleen.
Hi, thank you. At that meeting on the 13th, you said the assessment would be based on grade levels as well. Could you clarify what that means?
Assessment about return to in-person or not return to in-person?
Changes, yeah.
Right. I think what we would do is we would consider whether or not it's prudent to go with an in-person, you know, pre-K to 12, or an increase in in-person pre-K to 12, or whether it would be in-person at the elementary levels and not necessarily at the secondary levels, which some places are starting out with. The research has shown that the older kids are, I guess, more likely to spread it, but it just seems like that information changes continually, and that's why I say let's see what's what's happening at that time in terms of information around spread. But if it's consistent with what we've seen, which is that the younger kids' infection rates are lower, and the impact on the younger kids thus far, based on what I've read and heard, has been less impactful, we may be able to look at the in-person increasing at the elementary levels, but not necessarily at the secondary levels, or we could see it across the board.
Can I make one more comment? I hope that we can prioritize the kindergartners and first graders within the elementary. I think they have the most to lose from the remote.
Could I just piggyback on Colleen's comment for just a moment? Is that okay? Sorry, I don't want to go out of turn, but.
Anne's okay with it. We'll let you go. Okay.
I just want to echo also what one of our community members mentioned at the beginning of our meeting, which I know that other districts are also prioritizing, greater return for in-person instruction for special needs children. And so, I would hope that we would also be considering what more can be done for high needs kids at that time as well.
Along those lines, Sarah, the state's given us direction on the high needs kids, but what constitutes high needs? This is where the problem lies. A person could have a child who's not technically considered a high needs kid, but yet demonstrates a lot of anxiety that may not show up on an IEP, but demonstrates a lot of anxiety, clearly needs additional support. We kind of recognize those kids in a school, typically in person, and we provide those extra supports almost intuitively. And I think what people are saying is that, is the state's guidance enough? Or should we be doing more to bring in high needs kids, in not by the state's standard of high needs, but our standard of high needs? And if a kid needs to be in, can we get them in more and across all grades? So I do think that that's an area that we need to look at, as well as K1. I agree with you, Colleen, but maybe even more than K1. Those early grades, I think more like K3 to K4, because that's where our early literacy and numeracy takes place. Those to me are just absolutely essential. And I think that our older students are more independent and can work more independently, but not all of them. Some absolutely, even at the older grades, need in person. So
if I could follow up on your last statement, please, Andrew.
Michael,
I want to follow up on his statement.
Anne, you concede for a second, and then you can go next. Okay, Anne's after Michael.
Okay, and thank you. I'm not going to ask any other questions, but Andrew, thanks for the clarification around potentially having an expanded definition of high needs students. And I would request that there is a consideration made of not to wait until the 4-week mark to evaluate whether particularly kids who have social emotional needs that would be greatly influenced or benefited by being in more, perhaps that's something that can be looked at now rather than at the 4-week mark. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you, Michael. I'm just trying to keep some order here. It's not easy. All right, Anne, Argo, and then I don't know, Sarah, you had another question after that, but Anne, go ahead.
Well, I have to say, funny, Sarah asked one of my questions, and then while Andrew was speaking, it's like, oh, that's fine, I've got another one, and then Michael asked it. So that's great, because I actually had some others. So thank you, Sarah and Michael, I appreciate that, it worked out. I would love to follow up really quickly, and was wondering if the 10 days before school, if that's also a time where potentially teachers or even administrators or support staff, like our counselors, are reaching out to students that have already been identified as potentially being particularly anxious or having social emotional needs to be met, and then potentially so that those experts are prepared for when the students do start then in person, for all the students who are not necessarily on our radars already, because I know that this is such an anxiety-provoking experience for so many kids who may not yet be on our radar. On a really simple question is, when we were looking at the numbers for student enrollment, were the remotes spread fairly equally across grade levels? And well, first, Andrew or Beth, I guess, would be.
I think I'm going to let Beth speak to that because she has a better sense of it. I think that it's actually building specific. Would you agree, Beth?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I've spent most of the last 2 days on the elementary level, so I can tell you that, for example, the first grade cohort and the fourth grade cohorts across Pine Hill and Chickering are on the larger side. I can't speak exactly for the numbers at the middle and high school off the top of my head, but if you would like those details, I know Scott and John are on this call, and I know that they've probably memorized them at this point.
I was mostly looking from a logistics perspective, because I know that, you know, if it's spread fairly evenly, then maybe that makes it easier or maybe harder to then provide the remote, to create this remote academy like they were talking about at the middle school. So I was sort of wondering about the issues that may created, or perhaps there aren't any because they are relatively evenly spread out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially at the secondary level where students are in so many different classes, it doesn't really, you know, grade level is one thing, but, you know, level of coursework is another. So I would say that the kids are fairly spread across all classrooms. And, you know, I'd really like to commend the high school teachers, especially the science department. They've been in the building experimenting with Zoom and what it's like to teach we have adults sitting in as students in the classroom and then Zooming home and working out the kinks. And then they're developing a video for their colleagues to kind of learn the tips and strategies for doing that. So I think regardless of, you know, the ebbs and flows of kids, and we know that's going to change over time as kids decide perhaps to come back to school or as others have to go remote for whatever reason in their personal life or health life, I think our teachers are going to be well equipped to handle it.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think it's also important and to reiterate because even in our retreat, and it was really brilliantly put together, Beth, in that we tried what our teachers are going to be expected to try with our students, and it wasn't flawless. It was not perfect. So there's going to be a period of adapting. Remember, when we left, we went to remote, period. We didn't do a hybrid model. So, and it's certainly a hybrid model where we have remote learners coming in. So this is there'll be some kinks in that, I guarantee it, but we'll get there. I am really, really confident because I think our people totally get the technology. I think our people have concerns about our technology infrastructure, but I'm confident. I'm confident that the infrastructure is going to be fine because we will have never more than half of our students, at least under the hybrid model, never more than half of our school population in at one time. So there's not as much draw on our infrastructure. And we're also supplying all of our teachers with this new technology, like the laptop that I'm using, which I obviously can't show you, but is good stuff because it flips over and can be used as an iPad, as a touch screen, so that they can it's like mimicking the abilities of a smart board. So I think it's going to be good.
Can I just add one other thing, Andrew, if that's okay, and Brooke, if that's okay? It's just to thinking about those 10 days of preparation coming up. You know, I think that people have put their heads together. We have sprinkled trainings across the morning. So there'll be some health trainings. There's the usual policy training. So there'll be one of those each morning. There are tutorials each day on different apps and resources for teachers that they discovered in the spring were probably the most applicable and effective. So teachers can log in, you know, on their own and watch those tutorials. There's tech office hours each day with the integrators for people who say, oh, you know, I watched a tutorial on Seesaw, but I have a question about this. There's office hour each day with the building nurse. So if you're a middle school teacher, you can drop in either in person or online to see the middle school nurse and ask questions. But consciously, there's a lot of time built in for teachers to decide how they want to use it, whether it's personally or by department or, you know, by grade level, just because we know there is so much playing and processing and practicing and really synthesizing that has to go on with all of the PD they did this summer and all that they learned in the spring. So, you know, I think that's going to be really important for our teachers, and that we just give them some space and be there to support them as they need.
Can I just, Kate, I don't know, Kate McCarthy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but some of these SEL questions on identifying higher needs, because I know the SEL subcommittee has been working this summer, and it's an amazing group of dedicated counselors and professionals who have been talking about all this. So I don't know if you wanted to, I know you're there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Pipe in and talk about kind of where that is at the moment.
Yeah, so there are some things that we're looking into, and I know we've mentioned this at some other meetings, but there are some data collection tools that we're going to try to, there's one that we're really honed in on, and it just comes out this month. So we are anxious to move on that. And so it includes a data collection, and it also includes some curriculum that's all virtual. And so it could not only identify how our students are feeling socially, emotionally, but also some nice resources and tools. So we're working on that piece. The other element is the just connections and the ways that we're going to support relationship building. So one of the things that a subgroup worked on in the SEL task force committee is that they worked on a document that teachers and staff members that are familiar with students could fill out and provide information around for their incoming teachers, and how to identify people who maybe know a lot about students or can and have connections there. Our biggest focus is how to, during the mask wearing and the Zooming and all the different ways that we are engaging in the fall, how to create those natural connections that our teachers so want, and so do our students. So we've been working on some creative activities and some tasks for that as well. So we have some resources that are going to be going out to families and staff members, and really focusing on hearing from students around how they're feeling and what kinds of things they might need.
Thank you so much, Kate. I wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to hear that. I have a Maggie and a Sarah and then a Michael. Is that okay? Give Maggie a chance to go.
Thanks. So I guess a comment and then a question. So piggybacking off of Kate's comments around SEL, which I really appreciate, and really in the depth and the thoughtfulness of the work that's going into making sure that our students are ready emotionally and can learn from these experiences. One thing that I did see out in the Twitterverse this week that I thought was really fabulous, and I don't know if it's possible for us to do this, but it involved some videos of actual students doing the protocols that we'll be asking kids to do around walking up and down stairs and sitting in classrooms and eating lunch. And I thought that was really amazing, because I think it provides a social story for kids with anxiety who just need to see this stuff in action. And also, maybe using some of our student leaders would give some students a chance to experience some of this stuff even before school begins, in a way that would allow them to, go out into the world and talk about how it really will be okay. So I don't know if that's possible, but it was really impressive when I saw it on Twitter. And then my question is around, you mentioned, Dr. Keough, in your Board of Health presentation, about the Board of Health in your presentation, that they've asked for this outside audit to be conducted, and we're working on getting a firm for that. What, when the Board of Health asked for that, what are the implications for us getting that, and what happens with the results of that, and what is the implication of that call on us?
So it may make more sense for Matt or Kay or Jill to speak to that, but my interpretation of what I read was that they were, it was an advisory. So it wasn't a mandate, but it was an advisory. And we'd heard through, and you may have as well, through conversations or DS reopening account, questions about HVAC. And we thought it would be smart and prudent to have to jump on board with that. Dover was going to do an independent evaluation of their facilities, and we thought, well, why don't we jump in on that as well? And I believe that Sherborn Board of Health has discussed it as well and is supportive of the idea. The biggest challenge with it is that we are not sure that that can be done prior to our opening on the 15th. Mainly because logistically it's not that simple and it takes time, and there are others asking, these companies are in high demand right now. That said, to be clear, we've already had our folks look at our HVAC, and we feel confident that it's good. This is just another layer of protection. Like we talk about layers of protection. This is like another layer going beyond what is required by the state to make sure that there aren't any gaping holes in our systems anywhere. Does that cover it, Jill?
Yes, and I'm going to let Matt speak because I know he's ready to talk about it.
That's all right. I am also interested in hearing from Dr. Peterson because I know the advisory came from the Dover Board of Health. So I don't know. I appreciate Matt. He chats with us every time, but I would love to hear from Dr. Peterson since they are the ones who issued us the advisory.
We issued the advisory because we feel that even though the schools and the town of Dover and the town of Sherborn, for that matter, are all looking at their HVAC systems and thinking about ventilation, that we wanted another opinion to address, basically to assess our facilities, think about what our systems are capable of doing, hopefully do some testing and make any recommendations that they might make. I would say that in Dover, we have one particular building that precipitated this, and that's the Carroll Community Center, which is a very old building and that has real trouble with indoor air quality, as best we can all tell. So it's hardly being used at all right now. So that was the precipitant, but it seemed as if it was prudent to look at all the buildings. At this point, we have, I think, at least four proposals, and Chris Dwelly, the town administrator in Dover, is proceeding with the process of selecting a vendor. It's my sense that most of them or all of them will be able to get working on this fairly quickly. These aren't the kinds of evaluations that take enormous amounts of time. I mean, a number of days, but it's not a huge project. And so it seems as if we'll probably be able to get somebody fairly quickly, but the vendor has not been selected yet, so I can't be more specific about that.
Do you anticipate at the Board of Health, like, first of all, I guess speaking from the region, do you guys have jurisdiction over our regional schools, A? And B, do you anticipate not allowing students in the building on September 15th if we have not gotten any recommendation because we haven't been able to complete the work, or have gotten an audit back that suggests remediation needs to happen?
I guess, so I think the question of who has jurisdiction from a legal perspective is one that I really can't answer. I've heard many different people say that it's not clear who has that kind of authority, but it's theoretically possible that we would say that we would advise against opening if something horrible was found. I don't anticipate that that's going to be the case. And it's also true that that we're talking about a time of year when windows can be open, doors can be open, there can be lots of fresh air. So if we were talking about January, it might be a different matter, but I think we feel confident that there'll be lots of air, there'll be lots of opportunity for people to be outside. And also the numbers, using the hybrid model brings fewer people into the building. So I can't speak for everyone who's involved in this, but my feeling is that there wouldn't be a problem with the schools. I think the Carroll Community Center might be another matter.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your help.
You all set, Maggie, for now? Okay. Sarah and then Michael, and then anyone else let me know.
Thank you. One thing that I know is particularly top of mind for elementary parents who need, in some cases, to make childcare arrangements is the timeline on when we can expect to have more information on which cohorts our children have been assigned to. In other words, which days they will be attending school in person. So I'm wondering if someone might be able to speak to that.
Sure, I'm happy to speak. So Chickering, I believe, put the class lists in the envelopes today, and I don't know if they hit the mailbox today, or they definitely will be tomorrow. And Pine Hill is right there in the same boat, although I think they're doing it electronically. So I would say for sure, definitely in the next 24 to 36 hours.
Beth, if I can jump in, it's Deb Ryan. I mean,
yeah.
You might be preempting me a little bit. We expect to get them out this week.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you.
Some of them are in envelopes today. They're not all in envelopes yet. I'm sorry.
And at the middle school, Beth or Scott? Oh, they already know what teams they're on, right?
Right. Based on world language, yeah.
Yep.
And just to add to that, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of people are hungry for information sooner rather than later, things like bus schedules, to the degree that you know, there are major changes that are anticipated based on families opting out of the bus and route changes. I know in particular elementary families who have childcare needs would love to know that with as much advance notice as possible.
Do you think you can expand upon what we just said, Don, at all?
So we're just waiting, as you're waiting to get the cohorts, we need to get the cohorts in the system so that we can pull the students to do the bus routes. And just keep in mind, we're going to be doing double the bus routes because we have to do cohort A and cohort B. Based on the numbers that I preliminarily looked at, it looks like, I'm going to say 50-50. So of our cohort A, like about say 50% are going to take the bus. So it won't be an overwhelming job for us, but remember also we have to do seat assignments. So it's a little bit more labor intensive than normal, but we haven't been able to begin the process yet because we're still waiting for the cohorts to get in. But once we do, our first priority will be obviously the elementaries, and then we'll follow with the region. And as soon as we get a town done, we'll try to communicate that out.
Thank you.
But it's going to take us, you know, at least another week and a half to get all that accomplished.
Dawn, I had another quick question regarding the buses. Is there, or what is the plan to ensure that the protocols are followed appropriately on the buses?
So that's where I think we're looking to do a trial run of bus monitors initially to get the kids up and running. What I'm waiting to see is how many students are going to be on our buses. We do plan, I think at this point in time, to run all 19 buses just for the demographics that it covers. It may not make sense to consolidate you know, 2 buses into one. So we will see how many students are on, assign a bus, look at the driver and what we feel their capabilities are, and we probably will have rotating bus monitors for at least the first 4 weeks is what we're thinking, to sort of get the kids in line with their seat assignments, wearing their mask on the bus, and just sort of getting that routine down pat. We don't look at doing it for a long period of time because we're hoping with a little bit of training, the students will understand sort of the process they need to follow, and it just becomes a part of, you know, a part of their everyday protocol. So that is our plan, though, is to make sure we have someone on there who's sort of making sure we're following the rules from the get-go.
I think that's an important piece because there's always a lot of shenanigans that happens on the
Yeah, and we're, our initial plan right now, for passing purposes is to first students on the bus would be in the back and build ourselves forward. But I will say I've been looking on my listservs, and we'll look and see how many kindergartners are on that bus and, make the appropriate decision. So it will probably be a bus by bus decision on what we do based on the participants who are riding on that bus. So we will, it'll be sort of a individual bus decision how we may work that, because we don't want, say, 10 kindergartners in the back. So we will, like I said, I've learned from some of my job-alikes some tricks to the trade that we can now sort of work with. So it will be a very personalized seating arrangement, I think, based on the cohorts that will be on the bus.
Okay, great. And this may be, I'm not sure if this is maybe this is a question for Jill. Do we know when parents can expect to receive information on what the protocols are going to be, kind of what they're going to be expected to do at home, and what the thresholds are going to be for, or the, different protocols we're going to have in place for scenario A, scenario B, and what the triggers are, so to speak, for the different scenarios?
Absolutely. I'll apologize in advance because currently it's a 28-page document. So I apologize for the length of it, but it just speaks to the fact of there's so much information that we want to share out. And I'm hoping that everybody, once it does get sent out, takes the time to review it and then reach out to me if you have any questions, or if something in there isn't clear. You can also reach out to your building school nurse directly as well, because they've all been a part of the writing and the revising and the editing of these protocols. So I know that people are hungry for that information, as Sarah had mentioned, and we will get it out to you once we feel like we have read it for the last time, until there's another change.
Okay, great, thank you.
All set, Megan?
I think so, thank you.
I think Sarah had one more question. Don, I just was wondering if there's any, and logistically maybe a nightmare, if a junior or senior who's riding the bus would, want to make some extra money to be the bus monitor if they were on the bus anyway, if that's something.
Yeah, I mean, we could explore community service hours. I don't think we would necessarily hire them as, but I think we think, I mean, I know there's a lot of college students around doing remote, so we're going to try to.
They're up at that time. But
well, if they want, we're trying to price it to be advantageous for people to maybe get up and then go home and go back to bed. So,
okay.
Right, because it is a short term gig, because we're not looking to do this year long. So we'll see. We're hoping that at the region level, it won't be as much training. But we'll see.
Sorry, Sarah, you go ahead.
Thanks. I noticed, Dr. Keogh, in the slides on what the Health and Hygiene Subcommittee still has on their plates, there was mention of actively pursuing COVID testing options for students and staff. I'm wondering if you can speak to that. I know there have been some very late breaking developments that have been discussed in the news about rapid saliva testing being made more available. And I'm just wondering if you can share with us what the latest thinking is on the active pursuits for testing.
So can I apologize in advance, because we haven't even debriefed Dr. Keogh in full, because it's that much of a work in progress. So maybe perhaps Matt wants to just speak broadly about it at first. Is that okay, Andrew?
It is. I would just say before he does, though, if it's okay with you, Matt, just that one of the things that came out from the state is that they're now going to be deploying kind of rapid testing units for places that show kind of huge upticks. We would prefer not to be one of the places with huge upticks. So I think what Matt's going to talk about is something to help us to avoid that. And I have been up to speed on it. I just don't know what the latest is. So if you want to share, Matt, that's fine.
Perfect. So I think that, we sort of talked at some of the prior meetings that access to timely testing is really important. And when we talk about testing, we sort of have screening testing and we've got diagnostic testing for symptomatic people. And one of the challenges we've seen in the state, particularly as the rest of the country kind of got underwater with COVID, was that the turnaround time for commercial labs has become very long. And so that's led to an interest on the part of the district and the Health and Hygiene Subcommittee kind of working towards those goals to figure out what are our alternative pathways. I think that right now, we've been very fortunate where I think we also have lots of people in biotech in Dover and Sherborn. And so I think have had some outreach from people who are very expert that are promising leads. I don't think anything is totally ready to say this is clearly the solution that'll work best for DS. What I would say is I think there are multiple pathways for testing that seem promising and likely to be able to deliver the turnaround times that we want to see, even if the larger environment of testing remains problematic. I think in the middle to longer term, antigen testing could be really interesting, but is for a really different role, which would be, do we get to a place where we get inexpensive antigen testing that lets us do more screening activities? I think that the new saliva-based test has pieces of promise, but still requires a pretty robust lab infrastructure to support. So it's a little bit cheaper, but not way cheaper than the PCR. And so I'm not sure that it'll be a game changer for us, but I think it signals a potential willingness for the FDA to let tests that may be much cheaper, not quite as good, but much more available into the marketplace, which I think could be helpful. But even with PCR kind of standard of care-based testing, I think there are a couple of different promising avenues that we've identified that, kind of pass the gut check. It's the devil's in the details and figuring out next steps.
No, fair point, Dr. Vitale. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there that you have sort of the testing that you need to confirm when there's a suspected case because somebody's symptomatic versus sort of broader screening testing, which I gather that's very much a developing field, but obviously the more that we can understand about, the state of our population's health and the more that we can keep everybody healthy. So I just hope that we stay on the cusp of that to the degree we can.
Yeah,
I would add to that we're not alone in wishing we could pre-screen everyone, wishing we could screen everyone 3-4 days a week, but our competition is stiff. And if you think about, like, for example, I know I was reading about Northeastern and BC, and my daughter's at Stonehill, the amount of testing that these guys are doing because they have kids coming from all over the place is extraordinary. And I think that public schools are pale in comparison. We're small potatoes. So I think it's hard for us to compete with all of that, but I consider us very fortunate to have Matt and Dr. Peterson on this group with us and working to help us to find a system that would work for us, because I think what we benefit from is knowing that speed is everything. Effective testing and speed is everything, because the sooner you can get somebody who's symptomatic tested, the greater you, the better you reduce the risk of further spread. And so I think these guys know it, we know it. It's a question of whether or not we can secure it.
Thank you. I'm gonna let Kate go because she hasn't, and she has to jump off shortly, if that's okay. So Kate, you're up. And then Michael, you're up next.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. I have a question about sports, and I guess it's mainly a high school question because it has to do with the MIAA, and I'm not sure, our AD might not be on this call, but I understand the theory behind phasing in the fall sports, but seeing that we're starting 2 weeks late already, and then if we phase in, is there a concern that we might be potentially losing the whole season?
Well, I know Emily is on the chat. I don't know if she's at her phone right at the moment or her computer. I think, honestly, Kate, from my perspective, it's only my perspective, but from my perspective, when we put all of these things on a spectrum in terms of priority, my number one priority is to get this whole operation, and it is complicated, and I mean really, really complicated, to get this complicated machine operating smoothly and safely. And then once we know we've done that, I'm fine with looking at extra being the key phrase here, extracurriculars. I get that they're important, and I participated in extracurriculars myself. I just think right now our priority needs to be on getting these kids back in school and getting this thing operating. We don't even know how it's going to operate yet. This isn't even close to a typical year. And I personally thought it was a mistake for the MIAA to take that position. And I can only speculate as to why they did. I definitely appreciate how important sports are. Again, I played basketball here and I get it. But I think at the end of the day, our first priority is to make sure we get these kids in safely. And so I think Health and Hygiene was looking at it from that way, and I agree with that position. So yes, there is a worry that it bites into what would be left of a season on one hand. On the other hand, I think personally, I would feel a lot more at ease knowing that our numbers are stable. We're not having, crazy spread before we start sending kids on buses to other towns.
Yeah. No, I totally hear that.
One of the things I've heard is like, oh, they'll go on Saturdays and Sundays. It doesn't solve anything. They're still going to go.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, just like with school, when we talk about whether or not it even made sense, right, for us to go in person, would the constraints be so heavy that it wouldn't even be worthwhile? The same holds true for athletics. If the teams have to be so small or they can't play in the way that they're used to playing, is it even worthwhile? So I'm leaning that way, that we should wait and just make sure that we are fully established before we jump in. That's where I come from on this. And Emily can probably speak to what people are saying in the state. I do think, based on what she sent me today, that in the Tri-Valley League, the ADs were saying that they believe it is a local decision. And Emily, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, so the MIA did come out and say that while they might approve, it is ultimately up to your local community. And so with the question that does this 6-week delay mean that we would lose a season, fortunately that answer is no, because the MIA has added in what they're calling a floating wedge season, which the dates are very flexible. They're February 22nd to April 24th, but those dates are flexible. So all of our fall sports are able to move into that wedge season if a community feels as though we are not ready to play those sports. So they are not canceled, but postponed. And so if that was the case, then technically our first season could be the winter season, followed by the wedge season, followed by the spring season, if all would go smoothly. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the fall season is canceled. It just means that it would be put into that wedge season, which football is already in that wedge season because of EEA guidelines.
Thank you. Just to follow up quickly, and I appreciate your position completely, Dr. Keough, and I fully agree with you that school's the priority. It's my understanding that some of the towns are gonna be up and running with their town sports, and I guess that's just a separate group of folks making those decisions. But that's, yeah. And then would it be an all or nothing for the fall, or would sports like golf or cross country be able to run, or we're just going to take things as we learn?
That's a great question, Kate. And honestly, I have, sometimes these meetings just don't align perfectly. I actually am planning to attend the Health and Hygiene Committee tomorrow and had hoped to discuss this with these guys a little further, especially having Matt and Kay on that committee and having a sense of where their boards might be. Because when I hear local control, I think school committee and boards of health. And so, but that's something that could be investigated further. Because you're right, they're not all the same, right? Some sports, for example, tennis is a spring sport. But, and Emily, I wonder if other people, other systems have talked about shuffling their seasons. So what would traditionally be a spring sport might actually be played in the fall. Like, for example, I know swimming sometimes is a fall sport. Sometimes it's a winter sport. It depends if it's a male team or a co-ed team. Are there other towns that are thinking about running any of their spring or winter sports in the fall that you know of that are less of contact sports?
So that the MIAA looked into that about moving seasons around, playing baseball, softball in the fall and football and soccer in the spring, and they decided to keep the seasons as is. So the MIAA has come out to say that we need to play the sports that are in those 4 seasons that have been laid out. So those sports have to stay where they are, but it definitely was talked about by the COVID task force with the MIAA about switching around sports where, baseball, softball, swimming could be moved to the fall and other sports to the spring, but they kept them where they were.
And Emily, while we have you, and I know this is an RSC question only, so we'll try and keep it quick, but of our fall sports, which are the ones that are the least contact sports?
Yep, so our low risk sports are cross country and golf. Our medium moderate risk sports are field hockey, boys and girls soccer. And football got moved into the fall wedge seasons. I have to always count. So what is that? 2 soccers, a golf, 2 cross countries, and field hockey. Yeah. So we have you can't play any high risk sports in competitions right now, only practices. So those would be the 2 low risk sports are golf and cross country.
And do you think there's a possibility that places will go with their low risks initially and then move towards more moderate risk sports, or is it kind of all or nothing because the season is what it is in terms of length?
No, I think it's very likely that that could be a possibility, that schools might play golf and run cross country and then defer, soccer to the wedge season. So the MIAA is meeting tomorrow to come out with sport modifications for each sport. And that is going to be a big guiding force in how decisions are made within communities. Soccer being a big one, the youth level changed the game of soccer quite a bit in order to play it. And a lot of high school coaches and players don't feel like it's the same game. So then that sport, based off of what the school decides to do, might get deferred to fall wedge season 2, based off of the modifications.
And thank you very much for that, Emily. And so, Kate, when you said towns are doing these things, did you mean our towns are doing sports?
Yeah, it's my understanding that Dover-Sherborn youth soccer is moving ahead in mid-September. And I know that we're 2 separate bodies, but we're all the same families, so.
Exactly. You can tell I'm out of the loop. My kids are all grown up because every parent who has younger kids knows when soccer's happening, and I just don't. Okay, well, that's good to know. So I guess I will know more after my conversation with the Health and Hygiene Committee. And when is the region meeting? Can somebody tell me off the top of their head? Does anyone know?
September 15th.
Well, if we need to meet before that, I may call Maggie and ask her to pull something together if we need to. Is that okay with you, Maggie? Not that anyone's looking for another meeting, but
Sorry, you caught me eating a Hershey Kiss. I apologize.
I was saying, would it be okay if we had to add a regional meeting prior to the 15th to discuss athletics?
Dr. Keough, you know that there is nothing that the regional school committee likes more than having meetings. We will meet with you anytime you want. And I think, in all seriousness, I think on the case of sports, you know, it is a high emotional value for a lot of our students. And I think your points are very well made that our business is school and education, and we got to get the kids in and make sure that it's safe what we're doing with them during the day. And also for many of our students, sports is the reason they come to school. So absent their sport, just doing this whole thing is going to become really hard for a lot of kids. So I think, you know, we want to do what's safe, and we will meet you at your convenience anywhere you want.
Okay, perfect. Well, I don't want to mislead people or take anything off the table. I'm just saying that that's kind of where my thinking is, but I wouldn't say that it's etched in stone at all. And I'd like to hear more about what comes out tomorrow, and I'm sure Emily will bring me up to speed on that. I'll have more conversation later this week. I think it's later this week, and then my discussion with the Health and Hygiene Committee will be helpful, and I think we'll be able to go from there. So I'll have some kind of recommendation, but it hopefully prior to the 15th.
Thank you, and thank you, Emily.
Thanks.
Can I just make one comment?
Yep.
This is also on the Board of Health agenda for next Wednesday, where we'll be talking about the Sherborn Board of Health perspective on it. So interested parents who want to join and participate, that'll be a posted agenda item.
And I wonder if Dover has had any conversation or is anticipating any conversation. Kay, do you know?
Well, you're on mute, Kay.
It is something we've talked about, but we have not had much discussion, and we will sometime soon, but it's not yet on a published agenda. We'll be publishing that soon. When
do you guys typically meet?
We meet Mondays and Thursdays at 10 o'clock. Or sorry, at 11 o'clock.
Okay, good to know.
Thank you, Kate. An important conversation starting. Thanks, Andrew and Emily, for chiming in. So, TBD, I guess. I have a Michael, an Ann, and a Mark teed up. So, Michael, do you want to take it?
I do. Thank you, Brooke. First, just piggybacking on Kate's question, Andrew, or maybe comment, to the extent you're talking about sports and other extras in the health and hygiene, I don't think you're losing sight of Maggie's comment, but I think the comment about some students and sport holds true for other students and other extras. And so I would just urge you not to discount, I don't think you do, but not to discount the social emotional value a lot of those extras have for a lot of students, being either the reason or a reason why they're motivated to do the thing called school every day. And so even if there are compromises that need to be made in order to have some flavors of those connecting or that extra, I think that might be worth consideration.
I don't disagree, Michael, and you're right. I mean, that's not a very good commentary about what school is like for kids when they say sports is their, or other extras are their highest priority. But I totally get it, because kids are kids. I totally agree. There are, huge values to these things, so I don't want to dismiss anything out of hand. But I also, I'm always thinking that safety's got to be my first priority.
Absolutely. Staying with you for a moment, is there anything that is a red flag concern that you have, other than I heard that the securing additional nursing assistance is in a critical place? Is there anything else that is keeping you up at night?
You know, that's become my question that I ask people on the task force, what keeps you up at night? And it's a great way to get answers. That making all of this come together, making all of it come together, all of our remote learners, all of our remote learning academies, accommodating our students, our teachers, our technology, you know, making all of this flow smoothly is what keeps me up at night. It's like the start of any school year, really, but this one's the start of a school year on supermax steroids, and it will feel a lot better once we're rolling, you know. But until then, I think we're all super anxious, and that's why I said what I said at the beginning. We just have to hold on to our hats, be good to each other, know we're all trying, and listen to each other. So I have felt supported. You know, I think that you know, we don't all see things the same way, but as a system, I do feel like if you get out on the balcony, which it's important for us all to do from time to time, as a system, I think we are doing quite well. We're tackling issue after issue after issue, and I think we're in good shape, and I think we're going to be in good shape for opening. But yeah, there are definitely things that I'm nervous about, and I want to be sure that now we're moving into the phase where it really starts to shift over to building principles, and a much heavier burden now shifts over to the principals and to the teachers, and I want to be sure that we're supporting them. That to me is huge in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, really.
And in that, thank you for that. In that regard, I'll reiterate that we've heard in these meetings, I think each one of the school committee members have heard offline also questions about what can I do, right? What can parents do as parent volunteers, community members to lighten the load, to pitch in some, and I'd urge leadership to, you know, as appropriate, take advantage of the people who are ready, willing, and able to lend a hand.
Oh, you guys have been awesome. I mean, people are incredibly generous in these communities. The number of emails that I've gotten of people just saying thank you, it's really amazing. Unsolicited, just flat out thank you. And I know this has been incredibly hard for parents too. So, and for teachers, this whole thing has been so ridiculously hard, and yet people are putting their chins up and just going after it. And we're going to be okay. It's I want to say that in response to my asking people to, you know, offer to substitute teach, we actually have had some people sign up, which is fantastic. So
yeah, I did. So careful what you ask for.
Oh, God.
Well, guess what? That's what it's all about. It's a community effort. I mean, we in a time like this where we could have people get sick with a regular sickness but need to stay home, we're going to need substitutes, and they don't have to be perfect, with master's degrees in education. They just have to be committed to the cause and be able to follow plans. But, I don't know, Don, or Beth, are there other things that you can think of that we still have to worry about? I mean, athletics has been a worry of mine. Making sure that our HVAC stuff gets taken care of has been a worry of mine. Making sure that all of our staff are in place and that all our remote learning systems work. Those are the biggest things that keep me up, but I feel good about it. I mean, I feel like we're on top of these things. It's just, it may not all come together perfectly.
Yeah, I'll just say that's what we were looking at. The first week as being a trial. Like, we won't have everything set in stone, but Tuesday is going to be a trial for us, that we may then change how Thursday works. So it's really hard to know everything that we need to know, but I think we've got all the pieces of the puzzle. It's just how we put it together. We'll watch it play out, but I don't think we're missing anything, which I think makes us all able to sleep a little bit every night.
Yeah, I mean, I would say patience with us is helpful. Understanding and knowing that It's not going to be perfect. On that first day for transportation, I guarantee you it will not be perfect, folks.
It never is, regardless.
It never is. And so, you know, discretion is always important too. Like, you could send something and let someone know how you feel and really lay them out, and you'd probably be fully warranted in doing it. But is it productive in the long run? Perhaps not. Discretion is the better part of valor, and I'm trying to exercise that myself.
Thank you. There in the social emotional or the health and hygiene slide, there was a bullet about a integration of social emotional program to support student and faculty wellness. Is there an anticipated timeline as to when that program will be finalized, and is that something that that we can see at a school committee meeting in a deeper dive?
Yeah, I think I'll let Kate speak to that because that's her branch of teaching and learning.
Yes, so it is a program, and I was actually just looking at it with some of the psychologists today. It's a product from Pearson, and it also is up and available in September. They were August and now it's September. So as soon as we can get kind of a preview and more information on that, I will have that for people, but it's actually not ready for buying until September. Now they moved it a little bit.
And so is that something that is anticipated would be rolled out together with the start of school?
If we, you know, if the timelines match, that would be the hope. This really is the one that has an extended version, and it's K through 12, and it reaches lots of different categories. There are other products or things that we've looked at, but this was one that, after review from lots of different groups, had the most, checked the most boxes for us, for sure. So that would be the plan and the hope. We're going to be calling the company tomorrow.
Kate, remind me what folks would expect from that. Is this something where someone does an assessment, a self-assessment, basically electronically, as to where they're at and how they're feeling about whatever?
Yes.
And that it gives us guidance as to then double down on where those challenging spots are for individuals. Is that right?
Yes, it's a 30-question questionnaire. It's all virtual, and the product itself gives us information, and it also gives us suggestions as to lessons and videos and information. That's all through the virtual package.
Thank you. Last question for Beth. I guess that the first piece of the question is whether there is anticipated to be a substantial change in what an all remote model would look like, or is that simply an extension of the hybrid model?
You mean if all of our students and teachers went remote at some point?
Correct.
Yeah, so the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee was really deliberate in developing their schedules so that the schedules at each school are basically the same, no matter whether you're in a hybrid model, remote model, or in-person model. So really the only thing that changes is where you're sitting. You know, and I think obviously we want to make sure that our students and teachers have whatever equipment they need and resources they need. Obviously the laptops and the iPads will be going back and forth to school in the hybrid model, but making sure the kids, you know, in the first couple weeks of school, not only developing the relationships with the teachers is going to be super important, but making sure that they understand how to navigate the Google Classroom, how to find the resources, so that if and when that day comes, they're ready to rock and roll. So I think we've been pretty thoughtful about it. I'm sure it will not be perfect, you know, but we will adjust and support as we need to.
And
so then if there's a particular time where for a good reason we need to flip the switch and go full remote, from your perspective, we are in as good a place as we are with the hybrid model in the development of not just what the model is, but what the day-to-day would look like and how the assessments would look like and what the particular class time would be taken doing. Those are are running along in parallel?
Yes, yeah, the schedules and the logistics run parallel to each other. Our teachers continue to be hungry for, support around what virtual assessments look like and, how to juggle 80-minute blocks in person. But those are things that we're working through, over the 10 days and they've been working on all summer. But again, we've learned from the professional development we've done as a district that this idea of adaptable lesson plans. So plan for being remote or in person and you're good to go. So I think it should be, a fairly good transition. Some teachers would argue it'd be easier just to teach entirely remotely. So I think that, although we don't want to give up that in-person time, I think there would be almost some relief if that day came.
Thank you.
Along those lines, Michael, and this may have been where you were going, people have said to me, so does that mean we will never need a snow day this year?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good question. It's something that I want to talk further with the DSEA about and potentially the JSC. But we can only speculate. We've had power outages and loss of water, and something could come our way. And if push came to shove, I would suggest if we were canceled for some reason, we go right to remote, and I don't think we would lose a beat. I think we could do that, and we wouldn't be making them up on the other end.
Thank you.
As long as there's sledding or snowman time built into the day, Andrew, I'm going to insist on that.
Yeah, I did not run that one by the kids.
There's something magical about a snow day. So. I have an Anne. Thank you, Michael, by the way. An Anne, Mark, and then Colleen.
Thanks. In the interest of time, and because a good chunk of what I was asking was covered by what Mike was asking, I just really want to quickly say to Beth, I think that your idea for the administrators retreat sounds brilliant. I love that you had the administration walking through the students would be doing. And I was just really quickly wondering if building leaders or part of the leadership team, if there were any things that popped out to you that were questions or concerns that you didn't have before that now are on your radar that you are addressing because you ran it that way. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it took us a little while to work through the streaming out to our remote participants. And like I said, luckily the science department is working on that too. So I hope we have a strategy in place that the teachers can practice next week. I also think that we learned, as Andrew mentioned in his opening, wearing masks for a long time and heat is not comfortable. Also, when people are spaced out, for example, we spaced ourselves 6 feet apart outside in the tent and just tried to have a conversation. And it is a little difficult to hear from one side to the other side with masks on. And I know that we're looking into voice projection equipment for the classrooms where we feel like that might be an issue. Anybody else feel free to chime in. You all lived through it.
I think
that covered a lot of it. Yeah,
that covers it. It was really, I think it's important for people to know how it feels to wear those masks for a long period of time. That is something that kids are more adaptable than adults, in my opinion, for whatever reason. And I think it's going to be really challenging. One of the videos that Beth showed, I don't know the name of it, Beth, was about this gentleman who's learning to ride his bike over again, by turning his wheel the opposite direction. So if you want to go right, you turn left. If you want to go left, you turn right. And what did he say? It took him 8 weeks to learn that, and the kids 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what? And where did you find that, Beth? That was a neat video.
No, it came actually, I borrowed it from one of our professional development people this summer. I'm happy to put it at the end of your slideshow if you want, but it's neat. It's the whole idea of, the idea that once you learn to ride a bike, you can ride it forever, and then all of a sudden things change and no, you don't. So, it takes a lot of time and effort, and unfortunately for us older folks, it takes longer.
I think that's really what we were all feeling. Is like, oh, this is going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy. We still believe we can do it. That's what I meant at the beginning. We still believe we can do it, but we do think it's going to be challenging.
We all need to extend grace at every moment, so let's remember that. Are you okay, Ann? Yes, thumbs up. Mark, you're
Sure.
up next, and then Colleen after Mark.
Thank you. I think actually my question was also addressed through some of Michael's questions. It was basically about any staffing concerns you may have, given that we adopted the hybrid model 2 weeks ago, and that surveys suggest that certain staff members may be unable to come in under those conditions. I know we're trying to accommodate, and what I heard in your answer, Andrew, was that it wasn't a red flag item. I'm sure there are some details to work out, but just curious to hear whether there are any high needs with respect to staffing.
We've, it's been challenging. By the way, DS's challenges are nothing in comparison to some of the systems that I've heard from, like one neighboring system dealing with 60 people seeking remote. So we're, and I'm talking about fairly similar size, maybe a little bigger, but so we don't have those kinds of numbers, and we feel as if we're on top of it. We have 1 or 2 cases that are still question marks. We've had to make a lot of accommodations where we could, reassignments. People have found their own solutions, and I want to thank each of them because many of our teachers worked out their challenges. They deserve a ton of credit. And a lot of that was around childcare. These people are amazing. We have dedicated professionals in this school system, and we're really lucky. But it's all kind of come together, and we do still have a few cases that we're working on, but we're confident that we're going to be okay and that we're not going to have to break the bank. We are going to have to hire some substitutes. There's no question about that. So it's not going to be cost free. But how would you frame that any differently, Don?
No, I think that we are going to have some additional staff to be hired, but we're confident that we can either use existing budgets because of staffing changes that have taken place from your budget back in December, and also some grant money that we've gotten for from the reopening.
Thank you.
You all set, Mark?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
Okay, sorry. Just want to make sure. Colleen, I have you.
Thank you. I was wondering, I think this is, I'm not sure who wants to answer this, what the learning model will look like for a student who has to quarantine or a class that has to quarantine for the 2 weeks.
I don't mind speaking to it, Beth, but my interpretation is that if somebody has to quarantine but they're not sick, then it would look like their fairly typical model, except the remote learning folks would help them where need be. Is that at the elementary level? Is that accurate, Beth?
Yeah, I think the remote learning teachers could help where necessary, but it's really, at the elementary level, once you're assigned to a teacher and you're in the hybrid model, if you have to be absent for, a week or two, that student will remain with that teacher, and they would just handle it as though the child was out, with the flu any other year, making sure that they have the assignments. Luckily, these platforms will allow work to be given out, on the weekend for the week, so the student knows what they're going to miss. Our teachers are amazing in terms of reaching out to kids and families and offering support. So, it'll be handled like a typical absence would have been. And then if a class did need to quarantine, the teacher would likely have to go with them. So that class would just become remote for that period of time.
And that would be full live Zooms or?
Yeah, they would follow the remote schedule with 5 days of Zooms and, little mini blocks of instruction throughout the day.
Okay. If I could just clarify one point, and I apologize for interrupting, but the Department of Education and the Department of Public Health realigned their definition of close contacts last week, and that's part of what we're updating this week in our edits. But the definition of a close contact is someone who has been within 6 feet of an individual, a positive individual, for more than 15 minutes. So that does not mean, that no longer means that the whole entire elementary classroom would be considered a close contact. So that's an update that Desi and DPH worked out between each other last week, and we're adopting that revised guideline of a definition of close contact. And just to be clear, that was the original definition from the Department of Public Health of a close contact. So Desi aligned with DPH, which is good.
Are there any other questions from school committee members? I just have to say, this is instructive on how many details and how many things that you all have had to think about. And I've appreciated all of my colleagues' questions so much. I think that we've covered a wide range of issues, but I just have my hats off to Andrew and Beth and Dawn and Jill and all the building leaders. It's really, and our Board of Health, it's really, and Kate, hi, it's really quite extraordinary what you're dealing with, and it's not lost on any of us. So again, thank you so much to you and all of our educators and staff. Having said that, are there any other questions before we wrap up? Maggie, do you just help me? Do you see anything?
I don't see any, but I do want to remind folks, the 122 folks on this call, and particularly the members of the Joint School Committee, that we are planning to reconvene on Thursday, right at 5 o'clock, so that we can have our final review and vote on the face covering policy. I think that's really important that we get that approved, so that, as Sarah mentioned, families can look and buy some appropriate face coverings and be prepared, and so that our staff can know, what they can expect in terms of face coverings from the students.
Thanks, Maggie. And yeah, could you let your chairs know maybe if you cannot make that meeting, just so we make sure we have a quorum from every committee? That would be super helpful. It shouldn't take too long, but it is super important that we get that done. All right. You want to stay together another couple of hours just because we're used to it by now, or are you ready to go and eat?
Well, I will say this, Brooke, one last thing. Yes, how much we appreciate that you guys have given up your time. We're getting paid for this. You're volunteers. So you guys have really, you guys have had to dig deep into your own personal schedules, and we appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That does mean a lot. So thank you. Well, on that note, I guess we will adjourn until Thursday. And again, thank you for all the hard work that everyone is doing on this. And you know where we are if you need us. So
do we need to poll to adjourn?
Oh, sorry. What, to leave? Yes, we do. Do you want to start, Meg?
Oh, sure. And I echo all the things that Brooke said about all of the hundreds of people that are all working so hard to make this happen. Can I have mics undone at the region? Judy Miller, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes. So she want me to move? So moved.
Yep. Do I have a second?
Michael Jaffe, second.
Michael Jaffe, second. Michael Jaffe?
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Lynn?
And Collins, yes.
Anne?
And Hovey, yes.
Judy?
Judy Miller, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. Kate Potter had to leave the call for some personal business.
Angie, do you want to go?
Sure. Sherburne, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Megan and Paige, so moved. Second?
Amanda Brown, second.
Amanda Brown, second. And I'll poll everybody. Mike Fitzgerald?
Mike Fitzgerald, yes.
And Nancy Cordell? Nancy's on mute. Nancy, you're on mute. Or she's gone. We bored her to tears. All right, let's go to Amanda. Amanda Brown.
Amanda Brown, yes.
And Megan Page.
Megan Page, yes.
And Angie Johnson, yes.
And Dover, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mark Healy, so moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. And then Mark?
Sure. Mark Healy, yes.
Colleen?
Colleen Burt, yes.
Sarah?
Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes.
I know Leslie had to jump off, so Brooke Mettery's yes. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon.